Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Reddit stories video. Today we're just gonna read some pretty scary stories that I found interesting on Reddit and that I really enjoy. These stories are great to sleep to, or study to, or just do whatever you want to, just chill out with. Now, if you don't know, I'm trying to hit 100k by the end of the year, and it really helps the channel out if you would subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Also, while you're down there, I have an Instagram you can follow and a Discord you can join. We can hang out and talk. I swear I talk to you guys, and I really enjoy talking to you guys. But anyways, yeah, let's get into these pretty scary stories that are, again, just good to sleep to, chill to, study to, whatever. And thank you so much for watching. My grandma used to tell me scary stories when I was little. There's one I'll never forget. I was 10 years old when grandma came to live with us. It was about 6 months after granddad passed away, and I guess, looking back, she must have been lonely in that big house of theirs, rattling around with only the grief and memories for company. So, despite a few protests from Mum, my parents took her in. There were no protests from me, none at all. Grandma was loud and fun, and I loved her. She had an almost limitless supply of boiled sweets, and she'd always slip me a couple whenever she saw me. She was always the first to stick up for me when I got in trouble, too, but it was her stories I loved best. Grandma had all kinds of stories. Stories about growing up during World War II, and stories about the things she'd get up to with her friends on the South Coast after her family had been evacuated. Sad stories, funny stories, adventure stories. But it was her scary stories that were my favorite. Grandma had lots of scary stories. She told me she dabbled in the occult when she was a teenager, trying out Ouija boards with her friends. Tarot cards, fortune telling, all that stuff. Most of the stories I'd laugh off, or forget about not long after she was done telling them. But there were a couple that really did spook me a bit. I was only 10 at the time, you have to understand, and Grandma certainly knew how to bring the stories to life. She'd shut off the lights in my room so only the glow of the night sky shone through the curtains, and she'd shuffle in real close. Close enough so I could see the wrinkles on her face and smell the boiled sweets on her breath. Close enough so her deep blue eyes could stare straight into mine. She must have given me nightmares with a few of those tales, but now, years later, there's only one that I can still remember. Only one that stuck with me. The story was about the shower and Mr. Longfingers. Grandma told me about Mr. Longfingers one night after I asked her about baths. Grandma used to love her baths. She'd spend ages in them, light candles and incense, and lie in the tub humming to herself until the water turned cold. It drove my mom crazy, but when I asked her why she loved them so much, she said it was the only place she could relax. It was the only place that was safe for her to relax. People like me who are, more sensitive to certain things, we have to have baths, she told me seriously one night, shuffling closer on the bed. I couldn't possibly spend that long in the shower. It'd be far too risky. Grandma stared at me with those blue eyes of hers, unsmiling, and I knew it was time for one of her stories. One of the scary ones. I shivered with pleasure and pulled the covers up to my chin. Why is it risky, Grandma? She half turned to look out the window, watching me from the corner of her eye, pausing for effect. I waited, feeling my heart rate pick up ever so slightly in my chest. Well, she said after a moment, it's only risky if you close your eyes, of course. If you close your eyes for longer than 10 seconds. What do you mean? Why? Well, do you ever play that game in the background with your friends? The one where someone turns their back and the others sneak up on them when they're not looking? I nodded, and Grandma nodded back. Exactly. So that's what it's like in the shower, when you have your eyes closed. That's what it's like with Mr. Longfingers. A cold itch tickled back. Who's Mr. Longfingers, Grandma? She let out a deep breath, as if she wished she hadn't said anything, turned her head back to face mine. When she next spoke, she lowered her voice. No one knows exactly, Grandma whispered. Some think it's a creature that's attracted to the heat and smell we give off in there. Others think it's a demon that finds a way into our realm through the dense steam clouds. No one can say for sure, because the only ones who have actually seen Mr. Longfingers aren't ever going to be able to tell you. I pulled in a breath. Why not? Grandma shuffled closer along the bed and leaned towards me, leaving my question hanging in the air. Don't you worry about it, sweetheart. Don't worry your pretty head. As long as you remember the rules, you'll be fine. What rules? Well, when you're in the shower, you try not to close your eyes for too long. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay too. But any longer than that. Yeah? Then what? Well, any longer than that, and you may just start to feel something in the room with you, something watching. And if you ever go longer than 15 seconds, that's when you might start to hear a noise too. Hear what? The soft tap, tap, tap of fingers on glass. Fingers drumming against the glass door of the shower. If you do ever hear that noise, God forbid, will you make me a promise? What, Grandma? Promise me you'll never open your eyes. I barely slept that night. Hardly at all. I'd close my eyes and try to relax, but every time I did, I'd imagine a face pressed against my bedroom window, staring in at me. And when I finally did get to sleep, I had nightmares. Bad ones. I had them all week, in fact. Dreams about disembodied eyes watching me in the dark, and long fingers reaching out to touch my exposed skin. It wasn't any better when I was awake either. Not really. The shower was the worst. That's when Grandma's story really got to me. I'd never thought about it before, but suddenly I had trouble shutting my eyes in there. I'd be standing beneath the beating water, shampoo running down my face, and as soon as I squinted my eyelids closed, I'd hear Grandma's words running through my head. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay too, but any longer than that. I'd rub my hair fast, feeling the shampoo dripping off my chin, and as soon as I'd counted past 5 seconds, I'd feel it. A sort of pressure. Not a feeling of being watched exactly, but something close to that. I'd run my fingers faster and faster through my hair, frantically trying to get the suds out, and the ready blackness behind my closed eyes coupled with the rush of water in my ears would feel like a held breath, like the silence before a scream. The seconds would race through my mind, and I'd be so desperate to open my eyes again that I'd sometimes do it before my hair was rinsed fully clean, and my eyes would sting with shampoo. But before I shut them again, I'd always be sure to peer out through the steamed glass door of the shower cubicle, just to make sure I was still alone. It wasn't long before Mum realized something was up. She heard me crying out in my sleep one night and came in to comfort me, asked me what the matter was, and it all came out. I told her about Grandma's stories and about Mr. Longfingers. She got this look on her face when I was telling her like she used to get with me when I'd made her really mad. This wide-eyed, angry look. Only this time, she wasn't angry with me. She was angry with Grandma. My parents' room was next to mine, and sometimes, if I pressed my ear against the wall, I could hear them talking in there. Soft whispers. That night, though, after Mom was satisfied I wasn't scared anymore, and she'd gone back to her room, the whispers weren't soft at all. Oh no. I heard Mum hissing to Dad about Grandma, about the story she told me. Mum's voice floated through the wall, sharp and crisp. You know what your fucking mother said to him now, don't you, Simon? Dad's response was an unintelligible mutter. She's told him there's a monster that'll get him if he shuts his eyes in the shower. A monster. The poor kid's been having nightmares about it all week. Seriously, Simon, you'd better say something to her tomorrow morning, first thing, or I will. Grandma came to visit me in my room the following night. That time, as she perched on the end of my bed, there were no stories. Nothing like that. Grandma just sat there and stared down at me, her blue eyes wide and sad. The light from the moon outside my window lit up her wrinkled face. You know I'd never let anything bad happen to you, don't you? She said, after a moment. I nodded my head. I know, Grandma. You know I wouldn't let you come to any harm. I nodded again. Okay, good. That's good. She looked away from me for a moment, out the window. You know, the things I tell you in the evening are meant to help you, sweetheart. They're meant to toughen you up a bit, protect you. She paused and shook her head. But maybe your mom's right. Maybe I went too far this time. She looked down at me and smiled. But even then, even though I was only 10 years old, I could tell it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll tell you what, Grandma said. You know what I told you about Mr. Longfingers in the shower? Well, I'm gonna make sure you're safe. I'll scare the bastard off. How about that? It won't come back in a hurry if it has to face me. I stared up at Grandma, watching her face glow in the moonlight, watching her smile down at me. I nodded my head, once. I was the one who found her. I don't know when exactly it happened, but I'd guess it was about a week after we had that talk in my room. A week after she told me she wouldn't let me come to any harm. I woke early that morning from a bad dream to a heavy thumping sound. I sat bolt upright in my bed. My room was quiet around me and I couldn't hear anything from the wall that joined my parents' room either. But the house wasn't entirely silent. Floating down the hall, muffled by my closed door, I could hear the sound of rushing water, the sound of the shower. I leapt out of bed and ran down the upstairs hallway. heart already pounding in my chest. As soon as I reached the closed bathroom door, I started banging on it. A deep terror was welling up inside me like cold water from a well, something I couldn't place. And I kept banging and shouting, "Grandma!" over and over again, even though she didn't respond. Off to my right, I was dimly aware of voices from my parents' room, the sleepy shuffle of footsteps, but before they had a chance to make it out onto the landing, I'd lifted my hand to test out the door handle, more out of instinct than because I thought it might actually open, but the door wasn't locked. I kept banging with my free hand, and it swung suddenly inwards, bringing me face to face with a wall of steam. Heat struck my skin. I squinted my eyes against the damp fog and peered into the bathroom. And before Dad pushed me to one side, before everything around me descended into shouting and tears and chaos, I saw her. I saw Grandma. She was lying naked on the floor in the shower cubicle, the water beating down around her, blue eyes bulging from her face. One hand was curled against her chest like a dead bird, while the other trailed against the glass of the shower cubicle. The flailing finger marks she'd carved through the steam, still fresh and clear. It was the heart attack that killed her. That's what my dad told me. He said Grandma was old and the thing had struck her quickly and suddenly. She would have died fast without pain, Dad said. She wouldn't have suffered. I knew better, though. Even as a 10-year-old kid, I knew better. And years later, writing this as an adult, I still know better. I also know my wife and kids resent me for refusing to have a shower in the house, for insisting everyone take baths. They pretend it's okay and they humor me, but I can tell they don't really understand it. Not at all. My wife thinks she does. She thinks I still carry the trauma of seeing my grandmother dying in front of me when I was little. I guess she's right, in a way, but she doesn't know the full truth. Nobody does. And no one would believe me even if I told them. No one would believe me if I said the reason I don't take showers, the reason I haven't had one since I was 10 years old, isn't because I'm scarred from the sight of a dead body. It's because all those years ago, when I crept back into the still hot bathroom after the paramedics had taken Grandma's body downstairs, I made sure to check the marks her fingers had carved through the steamed glass of the shower cubicle. And those marks weren't just on the inside. Mystery Man. I was just looking for something to make my end of summer sleepover amazing. What I got was a sleepover that no one would ever forget. Margot, Ginny, and I had been friends for years, since kindergarten even, and we were getting ready to start 7th grade in a few days and wanted to hold our annual slumber party. I had the pigs in a blanket made, the chips that Margot liked, the sour gummy worms for Ginny, and a huge bottle of Dr. Fizz for us to share. I was getting the movies ready when I realized that I hadn't found our favorite game yet and started hunting through the closet. We had played Mall Madness, a game my mom had given me from when she was young, and it was a hit at any sleepover. We would shop till we drop, charge it up, and then laugh about who got the best deals and spent the least amount of money. It was great. I had probably replaced the batteries in it a dozen times or more, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. It had always been at the top of my closet, right beside my old Barbie travel case, but today it was nowhere to be found. I blew out in exasperation, wondering where it could be, but ultimately decided to go check the attic. It had come from the attic, so maybe Mom had put it back up there. I pulled down the ladder, glad it was still daylight so it didn't look so spooky, and went looking for Mall Madness. It was kind of a chore because Mom is something of a hoarder. Dad calls her a pack rat, and it seems pretty fitting. She keeps everything. She had clothes from when my sister and I were little kids, she's got school art projects, she had boxes of old photos and memory books and all kinds of things. I pushed aside a bunch of dresses and found an area dominated by old toys and games that she had saved. It was a mishmash of dolls, books, some old dollhouses, and a couple old dusty board games. I didn't find Mall Madness, but I found about 7 others. Apples to Apples was for babies, Uncle Wiggly sounded kinda weird, Don't Wake Daddy was missing pieces, some of which I had lost, and Monopoly took too long. I was about to give up when I saw a black box at the bottom of the stack that I didn't think I'd ever seen before. It was covered in dust, the letters barely visible, and as I pulled it out, tucking it quickly so the other boxes wouldn't fall, I wiped off the cover and read the red letters slowly, the red on black hard to read since it was so faded. Mystery Man, the name proclaimed, and I was about to open it to see the instructions when my mom called to let me know my friends were here, and I ran downstairs to see them. I tossed the game onto my bed as I ran past, figuring we would check it out late, and we were soon all laughing and jumping as we got excited for tonight. We ate dinner, we played hide and seek in the backyard, we hung out at my treehouse, and as it started to get dark, we came in to watch movies, play games, and start the rest of the evening's activities. Dad worked nights, and Mom didn't really ever make us go to bed when we were having sleepovers. We usually passed out sometime around midnight, but tonight we wanted to stay up till we heard my dad pull in from work. We wanted to see if we could stay up till dawn just to see if we could, and we had enough snacks and sugar to manage it, we thought. By 11:30 we had watched 2 movies, eaten most of the snacks, drank half a bottle of soda, and braided each other's hair during the end of Balto. We were a little bored with movies, and Jenny asked if we could play Mall Madness for a little bit. That's when I remembered the game and told them I had something different in mind tonight. The game had worked its way half under my pillow somehow, and when I pulled it out, my friends oohed and awed at it appreciatively. Boxed and found a blackboard with silver spaces, the big orange phone in the middle having an honest-to-God spin dial on it. We had cards with descriptions on them, and it felt more like we were assembling a police sketch than a dream date. We would go around the board, landing on spaces and drawing cards, and when we found a card with a number on it, we would dial the number and it would help us determine the identity of our mystery man. So it's like a little dream date then, Margot said. Seems weird, Jenny said, like we're hunting him or something. I looked at the instructions, but they gave no particular instructions on the purpose for making a description of the guy. We would take turns until we'd assembled our mystery man, and then we would call 000 on the phone and give our description to the person on the other end. Somehow, they would know if it was right or not and tell us we had won or tell us to try again. Simple enough, I said, and I picked up the dice and rolled first. It was about 4 turns later when Jenny landed on a card that gave her a phone number. She tried to dial, but she was having some trouble until I showed her how the rotary phone worked. Mom had showed me, saying that this was how they used to call people a million years ago, and once she got the number plugged in, she held the phone against her head and waited for the click. Someone came on after 3 rings, a weird, staticky voice that I didn't much like, and whatever it told Jenny, she didn't seem to like it either. After a few minutes, she put the phone down, her hands shaking a little. Well? Margot asked. What did it say? Jenny cleared her throat, clearly trying to get in control of herself. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. The phone man said the call was just for me. She handed me the dice, her hand very sweaty and a little shaky, and we continued. It was my turn to use the phone next, but Margot pulled out a card and laid it down. The card let her steal my phone call, and I laughed a little as I stuck my tongue out at her. She dialed the number and held the phone, interested to hear what was to come. None of us thought it was real. Well, Margot and I didn't, but Jenny scooted a little away as she made her call. The voice picked up, said something quick and harsh, and Margot's smile slipped off her face as she listened. Her lip was trembling as she put the phone down, and she wrote something on a piece of paper and shook her head when I tried to pass her the dice. The guy on the phone said to let you roll again. He said some other stuff, but I'm not supposed to say. I rolled again and grumbled as I landed just shy of a phone space. I wanted to hear what had them so spooked. This was a board game, ages 10 and up and all that, and there's no way it could be that terrifying. We continued taking turns, the girls wanting to keep playing despite their obvious discomfort, and finally I got my wish. I drew a card after landing on the spot, and it was the phone booth. Searched the deck for a phone call card and dialed the number. I took the first one I found and dialed the number, letting it ring 5 times before someone picked up. The mystery man is a blonde, about 6 foot tall, and a wide-brimmed hat. That's for your ears only, Toots, so don't tell any of those other bitches what I said. I'll know. That was a little weird, and I put the phone down with some hesitation. I didn't think they could say things like that in a board game like this. Margot and Jenny didn't bother to ask what he had said, and I made notes as Margot took her turn. I had a blonde card and a wide-brimmed hat card, but I didn't have one that said 6 foot tall. I guessed I would just have to draw for it. Meanwhile, Margot had gotten another phone call, and as she listened, I saw her glance over at Jenny, and the look didn't seem friendly. I don't know what the phone guy was telling her, but it seemed to be making her mad. We played the game for hours, and in that time, the game got worse and worse. Anytime Jenny got a phone call, it nearly put her in tears. Anytime Margot got a phone call, it seemed to make her angrier and angrier. I tried to take the phone from Jenny at one point, offering to take the call for her, but she shook her head and told me the phone man said she had to take it, whether she liked it or not. Yeah, Margot said, her eyes looking mean. She needs to take her calls just like the rest of us. As the game went on, we got more clues. I learned that my mystery man was a 6 foot blonde in a wide-brimmed hat with a mustache, black pants, and a white shirt. I had most of that, but I was still missing the 6-foot card and the mustache. The man on the phone had alluded to the fact that Margot would soon make her move against Jenny, the two being like dogs ready to fight, and when Margot threw down a card, it looked more like a knife toss than a friendly showing. White glove, I get to take one of your cards, Jenny. Jenny nodded, holding her card out like a fan, and Margot picked the 4th one, pulling it back smugly before glowering at it. You switched it, she accused, flipping it around to show the green sweater card. Jenny shook her head. Nuh-uh. Yes, you did, Margot accused. The phone man said you were a cheater, but I didn't want to believe him at first. Looks like he was right. I never cheated, Jenny said, almost crying. Then why wasn't this the green scarf card? The phone guy. But she brought her teeth together hard, and it sounded like wood clacking together. What? I asked. What did he say? Nothing, Margot said. Doesn't matter, just play the game. Jenny didn't look like she wanted to continue playing, but she didn't look like she was capable of stopping either. The game would continue whether we wanted to or not, and after that, the phone calls got even weirder. I pulled a card, dialed the number, and was greeted with about 10 seconds of heavy breathing before he spoke. The mystery man has a long, sharp knife. He's walking down the street, turning left on Martin Drive, and will soon be there. That sent a chill through me. Martin Drive, that was 2 streets away. That was like an easy 20-minute walk. What the heck was this? These weren't pre-recordings. This had to be live, but that was impossible. This game was probably 20 years old at least. It couldn't happen. Look, I said, hanging up the phone. Let's just call this a draw. I think this is getting a little too real, and the orange phone rang, and I felt my words wither in my mouth as we just sat there and looked at it. It was like watching a bomb tick down, none of us wanting to be the one to touch it. It just kept ringing, and finally, to my surprise, Jenny reached out to pick it up. Her hand shook, her breath coming in quick gasps, and as she lifted it to her ear, I heard someone snarl something, and she winced like she'd been struck. She held the phone out for me, hand moving like someone with nerve damage, and said it was for me. I took it, held it to my ear, and said, hello. Whether you play the game or not, you little bitch, the mystery man is still coming. If none of you wins, he's coming to get all of you, but if one of you manages to win, then they might be safe. You never know. Better finish what you started. I hung up the phone, trying to keep my teeth from chattering as I told them what he had said. That's not true, Margot said at once. The phone guy told me I had to beat Jenny or I'd get taken. He said Jenny was trying to win on purpose so the mystery man would get me. Jenny burst into tears. He said that you two were trying to sacrifice me to the mystery man and that I deserved it. He said I was useless, just holding you two back, and I deserved to get dragged away. I thought about it, weighing what they had said. Sounds like if we all win, then he can't get us at all. We have to work together to get out of this. Jenny shook her head. He said that if I told you what my mystery man looked like, he'd get me for sure. Me too, Margot said, her anger slowly turning into fear. Well, who cares what he says? He's coming regardless, so we have to do something. So we started playing the game cooperatively. Helping each other proved a better strategy, and Margot soon had everything for her mystery man. Margot dialed 000 and declared that her mystery man was 5'4" and bald, with a hockey mask, a machete, and a white jumpsuit. The voice came from the rotary, making us all jump with its suddenness as it reverberated around the room. You've discovered your mystery man, Margot. You are safe, for now. We were still for a moment, and then Jenny reluctantly picked up the dice and kept playing. She got a card, dialed the number, and choked out a sob as the man on the phone told her about her mystery man. He's on your street, she said, sobbing a little, and I rolled the dice so we could get to her turn again. White glove, I said. Let me see them. Jenny held up her card, but she started nodding at one that was 5 into the stack. I drew it, and sure enough, it was the mustache. Now, all I needed was the 6 foot tall and the knife. Jenny went again, drew a card, and breathed a sigh of relief as she dialed 000. My mystery man is 6 feet tall, dark-haired with a rope and a long coat. The phone made the sound again and declared, Jenny, you've discovered your mystery man. You are safe for now. I had picked up the dice when I heard something creak the door open downstairs. It was long and loud, like a funhouse door at the carnival. I tossed the dice, moved my piece, and drew a card. It was a phone call, and I threw it away and rolled again. I moved, drew, and pumped my fist as I got the 6 foot card. I was rolling again when the phone began to ring. It barely covered the sound of a footstep at the bottom of the stairs. I let it ring, rolling and moving like a madman. I drew, but it wasn't what I needed. I got another phone card and threw it away. I could hear my mystery man on the stairs, moving as slow as any horror movie villain. I drew the gun and cursed as I tossed it away. I drew another white glove card, but I tossed it and kept rolling and moving. I could hear him on the stairs, his boots clumping menacingly. I had to find the knife. I had to banish this mystery man. If I didn't, it would be my death. He came onto the landing when the ringing phone became too much, and I picked it up and put it down again. It started to ring after a few seconds, and I did it again before moving my piece. I could still hear his boots in the hallway that led to my room, and they grew louder by the second. Jenny and Margot were watching the door to my bedroom like it might explode, but I was focused on my task. Rope, tossed, clump, clump, clump. A wide-brimmed hat, tossed, clump, clump, clump. He was walking past my little sister's room now. He'd pass Mom and Dad's room after that, and then it would be down to my room at the end of the hall. What would happen if he got to me? Would they even believe Margot and Jenny? Would the mystery man leave them alone once he got me? I didn't know, but my heart leapt in my throat. I had the knife. I was done. I dialed 000 as something opened the door to my room. Jenny and Margot gasped, sliding away from the board and as far from the door as they could get. My mystery man had blonde hair, a wide-brimmed hat, is 6 feet tall, has black pants and a white shirt, and a knife. I practically screamed it into the phone, falling forward to cover it as I expected that long, sharp knife to stab me at any minute. I heard the tone and then heard the phone crackle out. That was a close one, Heather. You're safe from your mystery man, for now. I just lay there for a while, panting and trembling as Margot and Jenny came to comfort me. They told me they had seen him standing in the doorway, his blonde hair spilling beneath his hat and a sharp knife in his hand. He had raised it, took a single step, and then just disappeared into nothingness. We lay there, just kind of basking in the feeling of still being alive until I heard Dad pull into the driveway. We had made it. We stayed up until sunrise, just like we wanted to. I went down and hugged my dad, who seemed surprised I was still awake, but glad to see me, and the three of us turned in. I put Mystery Man back in the attic and have never touched it again. One brush with death was enough for me. So if you find a copy of your own while strolling through the thrift stores and antique malls in your area, be very careful with it. The mystery man you find might not be a mystery for very long. People think I'm blind, but the truth is I'm too scared to open my eyes. I think today might be the day we get you to open your eyes. I haven't opened my eyes in 10 years. My therapist calls it optophobia, a fear of opening one's eyes. It all started in my teens when I witnessed my parents getting murdered. My life was no different than a blind person. The only difference is they have no choice in the matter. But I had to adapt to life as if I was blind. I use a blind stick to get around. I can tell the difference between different coins just by how they sound. I've learned to read Braille, but when people find out I'm not blind, they either think I'm crazy or they think it's a joke. It's hard to describe the constant feeling of being scared. I live in a perpetual state of terror. It's like closing your eyes to the scary parts of a horror movie, but for me, I kept them closed. I've seen many therapists over the years. Some have gotten close to helping me overcome my fear, but there is one major obstacle. I've been attending a support group for the past 5 years, and throughout those years, people would come and go. Normally, to overcome your fear, you need to face what it is you're scared of. The success rate for this is high, but how can I face my fear if I'm too scared to open my eyes long enough to face it? I always found my therapist's voice so soothing, and always wondered if the voice matched his face. I think today, you need to explain to me what happened to your parents. I could feel the bile rise from my stomach and my hands began to clam up. I've never fully opened up about what happened all those years ago. It was my birthday, and my mom had just finished cutting the cake. I'm not sure where it came from or how it got in the house. I watched as it crept up behind my parents. It moved slowly but with murderous intent, a bit like how a lion stalks its prey before it. "What did this creature look like?" he asked. It's like I have a picture of the creature seared into my brain, and I can still see it, even with my eyes closed. His eyes were bright red and filled with a murderous hunger, I explained. My hands were shaking and I could feel beads of sweat roll down my back. "Take your time. I promise you are perfectly safe," my therapist said in a soft, caring tone. It was frothing at the mouth, and he had teeth and claws that looked like they could rip you apart. The sound of my therapist's voice had changed to a more concerning tone. "Are you sure it wasn't a man and not an animal?" "It wasn't a man. It was some kind of beast. People don't move the way the creature moves. and when it was done with my parents, it started to move towards me. I was struck with a paralyzing fear and couldn't do anything but close my eyes. I wasn't sure how long I was sitting there, but the police eventually came, and I haven't opened my eyes since. I could hear the glide of my therapist's pen as he made notes. I believe your phobia is your brain's response to the trauma of what you witnessed. It is protecting you from having to relive it. Kids process memories differently from adults, and in your case, saw the murderer as some kind of monster. I could feel a warming sense of calm rise up from my feet, blood flooding my brain. I promise you're in a safe environment, and there is no killer or creature in this room, said my therapist in a reassuring tone. I could feel my heart pound as I slowly began to open my eyes. My therapist had kept the room dark to protect my eyes. The sensation was probably what a blind person would experience when seeing the world for the first time. My eyes stung as they adjusted to what light was in the room. It took a few moments for my eyes to come into focus before I could see my therapist's soft, reassuring eyes. I always felt that the creature that killed my parents was always close, and just waiting for me to open my eyes so I could watch as he ripped me apart. The fear was still there, but the room was empty apart from me and the therapist. I told you there was nothing to be afraid of. I was about to rejoice in my newfound sense of sight when I was stopped dead in my tracks by the sound of growling coming from behind my therapist. A sound I had only heard once before when my parents were murdered. A feeling of intense dread overwhelmed me as I watched the same creature I was confronted with all those years ago creep up behind my therapist. It had the same red, hungry eyes as before, and pounced before I had a chance to warn him. My therapist screamed in the same agonizing pain my parents made as he was ripped apart. When it was done, it trained its sights on me, and before it could get to me, I shut my eyes again. You see, it's not a fear of opening my eyes, it's the fear of what would happen if I did. Arkansas Buffalo River NP Strange Noises. So I just found this page pretty awesome because I thought me and my friend were the only people to have some weird experiences while outdoors. Anyhow, my buddy and I serve together and we like to plan camping/hunting trips ever since we got out of the army. We decided to check out Buffalo River National Park a few years ago when I first exited the service. This place is amazing, by the way. There are old abandoned mining towns and mining shafts, along with 10,000-year-old ancient cave shelters used by Native Americans. Definitely check out this place if you haven't already. We decided to do a wintertime camping trip off a tributary that feeds into the Buffalo River. Maybe a 2-mile hike in, but many of the areas of this park are remote. We built a campsite off these stone cliff terraces overlooking the tributary and had a pretty ordinary experience, besides how cold it was, until our 4th night. It was snowing on and off, so we had a tarp over our fire. In hindsight, this was not such a great idea because we were definitely getting smoked out, but because of this, my friend decided to go to bed early. I decided to stay up and keep the fire going as long as possible for coals in the morning. After about an hour of me tending the fire, out of nowhere, we heard a shrill woman scream in the night, followed by a man's voice yelling, "Hey, hey, hey." We were positive we were the only ones out here. There weren't any trails nearby as we dead wreck into this camping spot, and since it was winter, the tributary was very low, so that negated the possibility of people recreating on the water. This was also around 12 a.m. at night. My buddy asked if I heard that, and I said absolutely. We always camp with protection, both of us carry pistols, so we weren't that worried. But during and after what we heard, we didn't hear sounds of movement, no brush crashing, just the shrill woman-like scream and the man's voice yelling "hey" 3 times. We rationalized that maybe it was a mountain lion. We read that they can sound like a woman screaming. We also checked on Google and at the ranger station to see if anyone had reported a mountain lion incident in the area. Nothing was reported. Hell, I'm not even sure if there are mountain lions in Arkansas, but I wouldn't be that surprised if there were. Anyway, we ended up staying one more night after this without any further incidents. Just thought I'd share. This was truly a wild experience for both of us and still can't really explain it to this day. We spend a ton of time outdoors and this is the only time we've ever experienced anything like this. Strange silhouette in the forest. Hello everyone. I'm gonna tell you something that happened to me this summer and I swear it scared the hell out of me. So hold on tight because this is gonna be a bit long. So this summer, I decided to go camping alone in an isolated forest. I know, it's not the best idea for someone who easily makes films, but I needed to be with myself to unwind away from the world. I found a spot on a wild camping app that looked perfect, quiet, far from everything, with a beautiful view and no noisy neighbors. Basically, paradise to escape from daily stress. I arrived there late in the afternoon. I set up my tent, prepared a campfire, and settled in for the evening. The sun was slowly setting and the forest was beginning to plunge into darkness. It was really quiet, too quiet. There was not a sound, not even the singing of birds. I found it a little weird, but I figured maybe it was just the serenity of nature. After eating, I sat around the fire and watched the flames, just to relax. That's when I started hearing strange noises. At first, there were creaking sounds, as if someone or something was walking between the trees. I figured it was probably animals, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. But as the night progressed, the noises became more persistent. Regular creaking sounds, almost like footsteps, but they seemed to circle around the camp. I tried to turn on my flashlight, but the battery was almost dead. I figured maybe it was another camper or hiker who got lost, so I decided to go check it out, so I wouldn't spend the night wondering what it was. I went a little deeper into the woods with my flashlight. The further I went, the weirder the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to close in around me, and the ground was strangely muddy. I felt like someone or something was following me, but every time I turned around, there was nothing, just darkness. Suddenly, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. A blurry silhouette between the trees. I couldn't make out any details, but it was clearly a human form, barely visible in the darkness. My heart started racing, and I decided to quickly turn around. I didn't wait to see if the figure moved or not. I returned to my tent as quickly as possible. When I arrived at my camp, I noticed something even creepier. My tent had been undone. The ropes were untied, and the sleeping bag was scattered. I felt extremely vulnerable. I stayed up all night, lying in my sleeping bag, listening to every noise, every crack. The next morning, I quickly gathered my things and left as quickly as I could. I don't know what it was that night. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, or maybe I stumbled upon something much more sinister. Either way, I will never go camping in this forest again. If anyone has a similar story or knows what could be causing these noises, I'm interested. See you later, and be careful where you camp. The Shadow in the Woods. The small town of Millfield was nestled deep into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by dense forests that stretched for miles. The locals lived simple lives, bound by a strong sense of community and an unspoken understanding of the woods that bordered their town. Stories of strange happenings in the forest had been passed down through generations, but they were usually dismissed as old wives' tales meant to scare children. It was early October when Sarah and her friends decided to go camping in those very woods. The air was crisp and the leaves had turned vibrant shades of red and gold. Sarah, a college sophomore, had returned to Millfield for fall break and convinced her friends Jake, Emily, and Tom to join her on a weekend adventure. They were eager to escape the stresses of school and reconnect with nature. The group set up camp near a small clearing by a stream. As the sun began to set, they built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and shared stories under the starry sky. The woods were alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, and the firelight flickered against the trees, casting eerie shadows. "I heard those woods are haunted," Jake said, poking at the fire with a stick. "My grandfather used to tell me about a shadow that roams around here at night." Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Jake. You're just trying to scare us." Jake shrugged. "Maybe, but he swore it was true. Said it would watch you from the darkness, and if you saw it, you'd never be the same again." Tom laughed. "Sounds like a load of crap. Shadows are just shadows." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered hearing similar stories as a child, but had always dismissed them. "Well, let's hope we don't run into any creepy shadows tonight," she said, trying to keep her voice light. As the night grew colder, they decided to call it a night and retreated to their tents. The fire slowly died down, leaving the clearing in near darkness. Sarah lay in her sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling of the tent, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. She told herself it was just Jake's story getting to her, but sleep didn't come easily. Hours later, a rustling sound outside the tent woke her. She sat up, listening intently. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. She unzipped the tent cautiously and peered outside. The campfire had burned out completely, and the moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy of trees. "Hello?" she whispered. hoping one of her friends was up. There was no response. She glanced around, her heart pounding, and saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the tree line. "Jake? Tom? Is that you?" she called out, louder this time. The figure didn't move or respond, it just stood there watching. Fear gripped her as she scrambled back into the tent, her mind racing. She shook Jake awake. "Jake, wake up. There's someone out there." Jake groggily sat up. "What? Sarah is probably just an animal." "No, it looked like a person, a shadow." Jake sighed and grabbed a flashlight. "Fine, I'll check it out." He unzipped the tent and stepped outside, shining the beam of the light around the clearing. There was nothing there. "See? Nothing. You're just imagining things." Sarah frowned, but Jake's reassurance made her feel a little better. "Maybe you're right," she said, though she couldn't shake the unease that lingered. The rest of the night passed without incident, but Sarah couldn't forget the shadow she had seen. The next day, they hiked deeper into the woods, exploring the trails and enjoying the beauty of the wilderness. The events of the previous night were pushed to the back of her mind. As dusk fell, they returned to camp, exhausted from the day's hike. They built another fire and settled in for the evening. The mood was lighter and they laughed and joked, the camaraderie dispelling any lingering fears. But as the night grew darker, Sarah's apprehension returned. She kept glancing toward the tree line, half expecting to see the shadowy figure again. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the warmth of the fire and the laughter of her friends. Around midnight, the fire began to die down, and they decided to turn in. Sarah crawled into her tent, pulling her sleeping bag tightly around her. She closed her eyes, trying to will herself to sleep, but a sense of dread kept her awake. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. Sarah bolted upright, her heart racing. It was Emily. She rushed out of the tent and saw Emily standing near the extinguished fire pit, pointing toward the woods with a look of sheer terror on her face. "It was there! I saw it!" Emily cried. "The shadow!" Jake and Tom emerged from their tents, looking confused and alarmed. "What's going on?" Tom asked, rubbing his eyes. Emily was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "There's a shadow right there! It was watching us!" Jake tried to calm her down. "Emily, it's okay. Maybe it was just an animal or something." "No, it wasn't," she insisted. "It was a person-shaped shadow. It had no eyes, no face, just darkness." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "We need to leave. Now," she said, her voice trembling. They quickly packed up their gear, their movements hurried and frantic. The sense of urgency was palpable. As they extinguished the fire and grabbed their backpacks, Sarah glanced back towards a tree line and saw it again. The shadowy figure, standing just beyond the clearing, watching them. "Go, go," she urged, her voice barely more than a whisper. They set off through the woods, the darkness closing in around them. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made them jump. They moved as quickly as they could, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the woods and stumbled onto the road that led them back to town. They didn't stop until they reached Sarah's house, where they collapsed in the living room, exhausted and terrified. In the safety of her home, they tried to make sense of what had happened. "It had to be some kind of prank, right?" Jake suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "Who would do something like that?" Emily replied, still shaking. Sarah sat quietly, her mind racing. She knew what she had seen, and it wasn't a prank. "Whatever it was, we're not going back there," she said firmly. The next day, they reported the incident to the local authorities, who promised to investigate but seemed skeptical. The story quickly spread through Millfield, and the old tales of the haunted woods were revived with renewed vigor. Sarah and her friends never went camping again, and the memory of that terrifying night lingered in their minds. The shadow in the woods remained a mystery, a dark presence that haunted their dreams and served as a chilling reminder that some secrets are better left undisturbed.